Hello, I'm Sean Murphy, and this is Data That Moves Us, the podcast from the Limb Loss and Preservation Registry. We explore how high-quality data translates into improved outcomes that drive better care for people living with limb loss and limb difference. In today's episode, we're joined by Steve Mantegani, physical therapist who works closely with individuals living with limb loss. Steve brings a frontline perspective on rehabilitation, mobility, and the human side of recovery, sharing his perspectives on how data, clinical expertise, and patient-centered care intersect to help people move forward with confidence and independence. Let's dive in. Steve, please introduce yourself and how you chose OMP as a career.
Sure. My name is Steve Mantegani. I'm the Vice President of Operations for NovaCare Prosthetics and Orthotics. A PT by background and happened to be switching jobs about 15 years ago. Went from hospital-based rehab over to outpatient PT. Was managing 12 clinics for physiotherapy associates at the time. And after 6 months, they asked me if I wanted to take over their O&P division. I asked them what was wrong with it because obviously it was just quickly handed to me after being there 6 months. But I had an opportunity to go down, meet the team, fell in love with the group, with the work they do, and I've had that group ever since for the last 15 years.
Describe your work at NovaCare. What do they do, as a whole?
NovaCare is a subsidiary of Select Medical. So Select obviously has a hospital division, acute rehab division, outpatient PT, and then we were acquired 9 years ago with some of the outpatient PT clinics from Physio, so we're their only little piece of O&P within their portfolio. We have 17 clinics across the country that I manage. My responsibilities not only being from the fiscal responsibility of each of the buildings, but also looking to grow, whether it be organically within our current buildings, or to go out and look at things that we can tack on to our current book of business and grow from a de novo and or acquisition standpoint.
Interesting. So you're a practicing physical therapist. What does that mean for the patient?
I still treat a couple weekends a month here in the hospitals. And surely anytime I'm out in one of our clinics, when we do some gait assessment on some of our prosthetic patients, I'll give my 2 cents because I think we all look at gait a little bit differently between the prosthetist and myself. It's exciting to be able to lend my skills when I'm in the clinics and not just be there from an operations perspective, but help out clinically as well.
What type of patients do you see the most? Upper limb, lower limb, or both? And what's the difference in those patients' treatment journeys?
With the upper limb, it only makes up 3% of the number of amputees around the country. So we do have a couple of clinics that see a fair amount of upper extremity. And when I say that, it's probably 10 to 12 patients a year. The majority of our patients are in that lower limb, whether it's above knee amputation or below knee amputation. Their journeys are much different. I think with the upper extremity, it is a much more challenging piece to get approved and authorization for. I think the struggle is a longer period from patient to get from no device to device or getting their devices updated. It's a struggle. We're fortunate we have a couple of very good upper extremity specialists who are able to rationalize the need for the updated technology. From a lower limb, it depends on where we are and what the insurance is. I think at the end of the day, it's always a battle with your insurance. Our team is very strong with both above knee amputees and below knee amputees and getting them through their process. But the journey can take longer depending if it's traumatic versus pre-planned surgery for diabetics or some other healthcare issue. But, I think with us, what we're looking for is to make sure whenever the patient walks in our doors, we assess them from the time they walk in and find out the right product for them, get them out the door getting back to what they want to do. So I think their patient goals are one of the most important things, and then understanding what it takes to get them there.
So when you're setting those patient goals, how do you use data to set up their goals and design their treatment plan?
That's always been one of the toughest things, is to figure out what exactly, gets you there. We are fortunate to have paired with One Step, who is an application for gait assessment. We started using them about 2.5 years ago, working through it for amputees as its basis is for able-bodied patients. But what they've been able to give us is a look into the data. And as I've talked with our team, if a patient walks in the door today and you tell me that their socket doesn't fit, I always ask them, well, how do you know? And it's usually one of two things. It's either pain or their gait is just way off. And usually it's pain and the gait is way off. So we've always done O&P from a very subjective standpoint. I think adding One Step in the objective data allows you to then take a better look at what their gait looks like. What is the limp, right? And the limp is decreased stance time, decreased velocity. And then as we go through the process with the patient and trying to pick the right foot or the right socket fit, being able to test them again and seeing if those parameters change. I think that we're in the infancy of this, but I think where I see it going is the ability to take 2 or 3 different feet, have the patient walk on the feet, and not only have the feel be right, but also the data tell them that they're doing better from a gait perspective with all their parameters to be safe. So I think that's really where we're looking towards data to help our patient care, is to really make the best choice for the patients and making sure we're getting the best fit for the patients.
So you're using the data to measure improvement and then also manage their care using those measurements.
Absolutely. There's so many options out there today. I think all the prosthetists have access to all of the different feet, and there's thousands of feet out there. But sometimes everybody wants to default to one or two different feet. They say these are the best. But I think when you put the foot on the patient, let them walk on it, assess their gait from a visual perspective as well from a data perspective, you can help them make a better choice. And sometimes it's not the most expensive foot. It's really just the right one for the patient. And, that helps with their ability to pay for their limbs because these aren't inexpensive.
So when we talk about data security is front of mind for a lot of people nowadays and trying to, keep their information secure. So for the patient or the prosthetist that's concerned about sharing their data with you from a privacy or a security standpoint, what would you say to them about sharing their data?
I think with the technology we have today, we can definitely, make sure we don't violate any HIPAA restrictions. I think the only way for people to move forward is to share data. I come from a different perspective into this field being a PT, but sometimes I think everybody's afraid to share because they're afraid that their competitor will get an advantage on them. To me, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do as an industry is make sure that you're getting the correct reimbursement from the insurances. You're trying to make the best decisions for the patients. You're trying to force the hand sometimes of the manufacturers into doing the right things for the patients, for the industry. So to me, sharing our data is the first thing we'd like to do. There are no norms in O&P. It's a struggle on the PT side sometimes to get norms, but once you have them, you can then start to direct the way you do care. You can start to direct the way you get reimbursed, and everything gets better for the patient. And I think at the end of the day, that has to be in everybody's forefront of their minds is we're doing this for the patient. So go ahead and share your data. It'll get shared safely and securely through the registry, and then be able to get that data back out to the people in the people's hands who are taking care of patients to make better decisions.
Could you describe measuring velocity and how do we as an industry need to adjust for velocity?
It's funny, when I first started with this group 15 years ago, one of the things people talked about was variable cadence. And it was just, hey, go ahead and walk down the hall. Now walk faster, right? There was no real objective data to it. Surely you could put a stopwatch on it. But I think for me, velocity in O&P is how quickly you get from point A to point B. And then how does it impact the gait? Because we've seen people who walk slower with better gait parameters than people who walk faster. And I think everybody's in the mode of how fast can you walk? How fast can we get from point A to point B? I think what we need to look at is how does the velocity impact the smoothness of the patient's gait? Because if you measure velocity and say the faster you walk, the better you are, it's not always accurate. I think sometimes if you're walking at let's say a slower speed, but your gait is safer, you can avoid falls. That's what we're really looking for. One of the things we're doing with One Step is trying to create an algorithm for their overall score that weights velocity into the equation, but it does not become the determining factor. As an able-bodied person, if you walk slower, you have a higher risk to fall. That's not necessarily the same for a patient who might be on a prosthetic. So I think we need to look at velocity much differently in the O&P field.
That's a great perspective, and I had not heard that before or seen any evidence of that. So having the data to support that would be a great example.
Yeah, because people think, you walk faster, you get the higher level devices. As we've seen over the last year with some of the microprocessors being available for K2 patients, K2 patients aren't running marathons. They're just trying to be safe at home, right? So I think allowing them to have access to technology that allows their gait to be smoother, whether it be fast or slow, is the key.
And we talked about gait and how to know when maybe you need to replace a foot or try a different foot for a patient. So how do you know when a patient's socket needs to be replaced? What does the future of that process look like?
Today, it comes in one of two ways. The patient says they have pain being in their socket, or you'll see it in the number of plies of socks that they have in their socket, right? It's just gotten so many plies in there that the socket's too big and needs to be adjusted. I think where the future is to assess the gait in that socket. And what you'll notice is, if they're in pain, they're going to limp. If it's too loose, you're going to see them with the gait deviations. Many different ones can happen from being a loose socket. So I think what we need to do is have them assessed with their walking gait. And then when we start to put the next product on them, understanding what we need to do for them, right? Do we need to make the socket a little bit tighter? Do we need to make the socket a little bit bigger? There are adjustable sockets now, so that people who fluctuate in volume on a day-to-day basis maybe need that as their key so that they can smooth their gait. But I think end of the day, if the fit is right, what you'll see is a better step length, better stability when they walk, and a better velocity for them. And I think that's how we tell. And I think prior to data, there was just a quick look at them, right? Oh, they're limping. Well, what's in the limp is the question, right? Is it shortened stance time? Is it shortened step length? And then when we make those adjustments, what do we see come of those pieces of data?
We've been looking at some innovations in the industry lately, the osseointegration, 3D printing. Osseointegration seems to be taking hold. You didn't used to be able to get that surgery in this country, and now you can, and you see it more often now. What do you think drives the hesitancy towards adopting the 3D printing of sockets?
I'll be 100% honest because we have some practitioners who have always hand casted. And I think it's for them, it's the fact that they don't have any control over it, right? They like to hand cast, they like the feel, they like to be able to do it. I think when scanning came into play, before even 3D printing came, the scanning scared them because you're not touching them, you're not feeling the way the body contours. And then to get the 3D sockets, it's like, well, now I have no control, right? I just take the scan, I put it in the printer, and off it comes. We actually do have a 3D printer in one of our offices, and we have people who hand cast in that office as well. And what they've told me is they don't notice a big difference. The nice part about the 3D printing of the sockets for a test socket is they can get it onto the patient faster. They can take the scan, they can put it in the printer, wake up the next morning, have the socket in hand, be able to test them right away, versus having to cast, pour, modify, and do all the different steps. It's a very quick turnaround. So I think the 3D printing in the test socket phase has been successful for us in one of our offices. But I think the hesitancy still remains, some of the generation that only hand casted does not want to get into scanning, and they don't want to get into 3D printing.
I think with hand sculpting the sockets, it seems to be part trade and part art form, right?
That's what I used to always say. I was always amazed to watch them sculpt and make the shape come out. You start with this block and you're like, oh, it looks, kind of like the leg. And then all of a sudden they spend a little time with it and it looks exactly like it. You can see the quad popping out. You can see all of the different trim lines. And you're like, wow, it's an art form for sure.
So back to data again, when we're talking about this, what's the time in your life when you were relieved or it was really beneficial that someone had data, say, as a good use case to make a better decision?
Unfortunately, healthcare is one of the biggest areas where you want the data. And sometimes it can be scary. My father went through having cancer. Right. So I think the first thing you're looking at is the data to say, what's the chance for recovery? Where's the best place to get care? Who's seen this the most? So there was a lot of data out there to be able to make sure that you make informed decisions about where you get that taken care of, what procedure you want to use, what your odds are. And fortunately, there was a lot of data out there on that. And, I'm happy to say that he's cancer free and we were able to utilize the data to make sure we made good decisions for him.
I'm glad your dad had a good recovery there.
Yeah, same here. He's a great advocate now for some of the post-care stuff. So it worked out well.
With these innovations and more data becoming available and being more used, what do you think the future of O&P looks like in 15 years? And what role does data and data sharing, the registry that we have in getting us to that future?
The data is going to help drive this industry in the direction it needs to go. Being a PT, I've always told our O&P team that you guys are probably about 10, 15 years behind us because we had to do this 10, 15 years before you guys did. But in order to get better reimbursement, in order for insurance companies to understand what we really do, we have to be able to show difference, right? And difference can't just be that the patient was happier when they left. As much as that is something we strive for, we have to be able to demonstrate that we've made a difference in their lives. And what does that look like? It looks like less falls. It looks like returning to their activities that they want to get back to, achieving their goals. So I think if we use the data and we're able to show that, the work that we're doing is making a difference in the patient's lives, we will be able to get access to better products for the patients, better reimbursement for those products. Because I think today what we find is, unfortunately, some patients' insurances just don't reimburse enough, and you're not able to get them the product that you think that would best suit them because it's not covered. And when you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars and asking patients to spend that money, even though it's a big difference in their lives, it's not always easy to access. So I think if we can show that if you put this technology on them, if you pay this amount of money for them, that they will live healthier lives. And I think that's really what should be the goal for all of healthcare.
I can see where the Limb Loss and Preservation Registry would have a big role in that, collecting the data and being able to give you that information that you need to support those claims.
Absolutely. And today, nobody knows how well you're doing, right? Because we don't share our data. It's not to say who's better than the other. It's just a matter of to understand as a whole, what are we doing for our AKs? What are we doing for our BKs? What are we doing for our upper extremity patients? And then how do we get better? And that should be everybody's goal. As a PT, the group is very competitive. And I used to tell our guys, all right, we're going to stack rank you, right? And the people at the bottom didn't think they were bad. They just didn't want to be at the bottom anymore, right? They just wanted to be up. And it pushes the entire industry to a higher level. So I think with the data that we have, if you see that you're below the industry average, your goal should be to strive to be of and keep moving that average up, right? And even though there's always a bottom 10% and top 10%, as long as you're moving the bar up, the patients are getting better.
Thank you for joining us on Data That Moves Us. Whether you're a clinician, researcher, patient advocate, or other expert, your voice and your experience matter. Stay connected with us on social media through LinkedIn and Instagram. Together, we're building the evidence that drives better outcomes. To learn more about the Limb Loss and Preservation Registry and how to join, visit our website at llpr.org and become part of the movement.